Welcome to Heather Sells NYC with your host, Heather M. Cooper. Each episode is focused on helping people navigate through the intricacies of buying and selling real estate in New York City to get the greatest value. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, heathersellsnyc.com. Now here's the host of Heather Sells NYC, Heather M. Cooper.
Good morning, Carla. How are you?
Good morning, Heather. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I've been really wanting to interview you just for an introduction to my guest. Carla is a matrimonial and family law attorney. She has been practicing for 20 years. Wow, that is a long time.
It is a long time. Time flies, right? As they say when we're having fun. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I'm excited to dig into matrimonial and family law and the intricacies of what happens and how it happens and how it affects real estate. So why don't we just kick off?
Sure.
Just to give the guests a little background about you. Everybody always wants to know, how did you get into matrimonial and family law? Like, was that something that from when you were little that you dreamed of?
Yeah. I don't know if it was started that, early in my life, but what I'll say is, I've always been drawn to work that helps people, where I can really make a difference. And I studied as a sociology major, but really focused on the family dynamic in my undergraduate studies. So it seemed certainly a natural fit that once I decided to go to law school, which I did always want to do, that certainly predated the undergraduate degree. I always kind of knew I wanted to be a lawyer, just wasn't sure, what type. And that developed really, later after I studied undergraduate. And then I chose a law school. I went to Cuny Law School in 1994 to 1997, were my law school years. And Cuny's mission was and still is law in the service of human needs. And it was a really good fit for me, together with, really wanting to help families that are in need at a really difficult time. So in part, I think it comes naturally to me as who I am as a person and as a professional. And it's really a pleasure to be able to work in a career that is really makes a difference in people's lives.
That is really great. I mean, being a matrimonial attorney and having to go to court and, solving problems on a daily basis, and then sometimes dealing with, people fighting and unhappy. I mean, how do you keep yourself sort of even keeled when there's so many angry people?
Yeah. It's not easy by any stretch, for sure. But I think my years of experience, certainly my tolerance for working within the profession and dealing with those heavy issues, very emotional, very difficult. Yes, and it's not, most times people aren't getting along. That's why they need a lawyer for help. I I try not so much, it's my job. I've always viewed my role for my clients as not getting absorbed in the stress of the situation. It's sort of my job, I feel, to take it down a notch or two or three for them and help them and navigate. So I very much see myself at, steering the ship in many ways, to navigate the rough seas, so to speak, to help them. That helps because I'm certainly not stressed out like my clients are. Or over the situation, or have that. I don't carry that anxiety with me more. I really view my role as to avoid that for them. And I certainly don't get wrapped up in the emotion of what they're going through. That wouldn't be helpful to them. And so then, in my downtime on my weekends and evenings, I really do try to create space for myself and my family. I, enjoy family and friends. I have a, personal workout routine. I go to the gym. I do what I need to do to reset myself so that I can, be prepared again, day after day to help in the way that I'm needed.
Would have to really rejuvenate, spend time with your family, and just have a lot of downtime. I mean, balance is key, right?
It is for all of us, working, working and a good work-life balance is very helpful. I also find it very helpful to put down the phone on the weekends and step away, as much as, albeit emergencies, but, and those do arise in this profession, but blocking out time to answer the emails that come in over the weekend works far better in being able to do that and rest a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there could be. But it's good that you know how to navigate that. And in real estate, it's always about like pain or pleasure, having people make a move. And in matrimonial and family law, it's really about pain. And as a matrimonial attorney, I guess, do you have a preference for representing? Do you have a preference for the person that wants a divorce?
Yeah. I didn't hear part of your question. Could you repeat that again?
So sorry, so sorry. Do you have a preference for, representing, say, the husband who initiated the divorce, or the wife who, I guess what, the plaintiff or the defendant? Not that I'm an attorney, but
Right. Each has to take that role, that plaintiff or defendant position. But I don't have a preference per se. No, I definitely don't have a preference with, which side I am, or even how I come into the case. The plaintiff in a divorce case, probably this goes for most cases. If it comes to the time of trial, is able to present his or her case first. So that's really the only benefit. And sometimes I always tell people, sometimes that's not a benefit. Sometimes you want to go second, and let the plaintiff, person who filed, go first. But it really does. There is no, benefit to that, other than that particular strategy. And in most cases, it really is not, one way or the other is not going to be the driving force. In many cases that we handle in New York, parties don't even go to court until the very end. It actually gets filed as an uncontested divorce. That doesn't mean that the parties were always getting along and that they did it themselves and just, was able to submit divorce papers. Sometimes there's a lot of work. Many couple of years could go by trying to get a case done. And then at the end, it's filed as an uncontested. So it doesn't mean that you have to be in the courtroom, litigating and having a case on the court's docket in order to work on divorce.
Got it. Very, very interesting. The world of divorce and family law. It's never a dull moment, right?
It isn't. That's part of why I really like the profession. Every day is different. We may get involved in, similar issues arise, but every case is different because every marriage is different and we're all individuals, and what works for one set of people isn't going to work for another. So it allows us to learn a lot. Real estate comes up a lot. For some people, their main and primary asset is their home. And that becomes a difficult thing to divide. Who's going to move out? When? Is it going to get sold? Is it not? So really it gets very involved. And those are always different issues depending on what type of home, apartment, condo, co-op, all the ins and outs of the different types of real estate in New York City.
Right. And that was going to be the next question. Like, what
Mm.
if somebody comes to me and says, and they want to sell their apartment, but then I later realize after going through a whole listing presentation that they're going through a divorce. They failed to tell me that little important part.
Yeah.
So then,
Well, a couple of things. They don't have to. I mean, prospective buyers might not want to know that this house is in a divorce case. And so they may not tell the realtors. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It really is probably a case by case situation. However, what is a big no-no is that one spouse cannot sell or move forward with a sale of a residence while the divorce case is pending, unless there is an agreement. When someone starts a divorce case, there's something called automatic orders. And those automatic orders come down from the court. They're served with the summons, and it starts right away as soon as the divorce filing. And that prohibits parties from selling assets. No matter who's on title, no matter what that person may think, well, I owned this before the marriage, it's my premarital property, I could sell it. You can't sell it pending while a divorce case is pending unless you have written agreement from your spouse. So it would be a violation of the automatic orders. We see it happen. It does happen. And then, one side's going to rush to court to get a restraining order against the other. And it's potentially contempt of court because it's an automatic order. And it is exactly that. It's an order. So that's something you have to be very careful of. If two parties are on the deed or the shares of stock for a co-op or whatever the case is, you'll want the consent of both to sign. Now, if they're both signing a listing agreement, that's indicative that they agree to sell it.
Right. And for the most part, I usually like when both parties agree. But what happens if I meet with, one owner and then the other owner doesn't want to use me, or they want to, interview the three different agents?
Sure.
Does that have to?
They have, the lawyers would be negotiating with each other on behalf of their clients about the aspects of sale. It comes down to when to list it. Potentially, it could say, what the starting listing price should be, who is chosen to sell or list, as the agent. And generally speaking, there's got to be notification and consent ultimately each step of the way. So that is something that we like to see ironed out and we can help with. And as agents, if you learn you have two parties who are having trouble in that realm because they are separating, one good thing to do is suggest that you can collaborate with their divorce lawyers, because that really does help. I like to get, the agent that we use ultimately together, potentially on a call, so that everybody is, understanding the same facts.
Right. I would think that it would be super, super important to work with all parties and work together to make sure that everybody's happy.
Definitely.
That's the main goal, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Yes.
to make sure that the real estate agent that is hired gets them the highest price and the quickest time possible.
Definitely. That's always helpful.
Is there anything that perhaps that you see that I can know, be prepared for as a real estate agent if somebody that is getting divorced or has been divorced? Sometimes somebody may come to me in divorce and they may say, I still own the apartment. And then what happens 5 years later?
Sure.
Sometimes there's a divorce decree that says, they don't need to sign, but in a co-op, it says that they do need to sign. So it just gets, a little hairy. So,
Yeah, it's really helpful for you to see that portion anyway of their settlement agreement or judgment of divorce. If they went to trial, they're going to get a written decision from the judge that ultimately gets becomes part of that judgment of divorce. Or there will more times than not, you'll see a written settlement agreement, and there'll be provisions about the house and how that's dealt with. So it's always a good idea maybe to have some knowledge of that, so you know who's responsible for what. Ultimately, what ends up happening is when it's time for closing is, and in my opinion, that's sometimes, not too late, but it's stressful to suddenly hear that, what does the settlement statement look like? Who's writing the check to who? Where do the proceeds go? So it's important to know, especially when it comes down to closing. What are you doing with the money? Are you distributing it to them? Are you distributing it to some law firm to hold in escrow? Because what we often do is there could be agreement to sell it, but there may not be agreement as to how to distribute the proceeds of the sale. And so that's very important. So finding out perhaps as a realtor at some point, maybe after um, the listing agreement is, it's a tough issue because some parties really don't want prospective buyers to know there's maybe a divorce going on, because whether or not something gets held up or, things of that nature. I mean, because of these rules about, proceeding and having them agree. So it's really good to know what stage they're at. Are they in divorce? At what stage is it? Is there agreement on the aspects of the sale? And ultimately what to do with the proceeds. And if some lawyers haven't sort of dug deep enough and put all of those provisions in, there's going to be problems at the time of closing that I always see them get resolved. Nobody wants to blow up a sale, over not having dealt with the issues, but it causes quite a frenzy. Everybody's on the phone and, trying to work on things with very short notice.
right, I can
So
imagine.
avoid that would be really helpful to everybody. And it's always good to work collaboratively with the real estate agent, and the lawyers if possible.
Yeah, it's certainly helpful for all parties to work together, and probably for the real estate agent to do their due diligence and to ask all of these questions to you, the relevant information in order to move forward and in order to sell the property in a timely fashion.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah,
And
definitely.
what would you say, just for having just for having fun, like as a matrimonial attorney,
Mhm.
is what would you say would be like the most difficult part of your job?
Of my job as a whole, the most difficult part, hmm, it's, to think about that one. I would say the most difficult part of the job is getting to a place where we can discuss division of property, custody, support, um, in the early parts of the filing of divorce. It's very difficult for people to go through this, even if they want the divorce. It's very, very difficult to take that first step most times, to file, to send that letter, to get that lawyer, to send the letter to the other spouse to say, we're moving forward, to have those discussions even. I mean, many times I'm retained well before there's any action on a divorce, just to learn about the process. The person wants to know the process, what to expect, and sort of to get mentally prepared for what lies ahead. So I think the most difficult and challenging part is moving through that initial, maybe first month of the representation when this is new, because people generally are acting more on emotion than on a sort of level playing field as to what does this realistically look like down the road, a year or 2 or 3, once this change occurs. It's a major life event. It's a major life change. Um, that's challenging. It's challenging to work with people, and I think it calls for a great amount of empathy, understanding patience, certainly. So, patience for, is just required for any matrimonial lawyer. But the more patience a person has, I think, the better it is for the clients.
Absolutely. Patience is certainly key when it comes to divorce, when it comes to real estate. I mean, I understand that by working with buyers, by working with sellers. Many people want to sell yesterday. Now,
Yeah.
is there a type of divorce like is one divorce like if somebody's been married for like a year as opposed to married for 20 years? Can one divorce be a little bit more difficult, or every divorce kind of has their little intricacies, so to speak?
Sure. Well, I think custody cases and issues involving the children are very hard, are very time consuming often. Those cases can be very challenging. And then so that could be a very short, marriage, but yet you have a child together. So that can cause for a lengthy battle, can be cause for a custody fight. Sharing time and decision making around the child is difficult for people who aren't getting along, who don't want to be together anymore. Um, the issues that rise in a longer term marriage, there's generally more assets to divide. There could be multiple homes. There could be businesses and business interests that need to be valued and divided, and things to be determined along the way. With that, there's generally more assets in a longer term marriage. So the issues over, what it looks like for division and support, alimony. It's called spousal maintenance in New York. Some states still call it alimony. The support of one spouse to the other and payment of child support. All of those issues come into play. And really, whether it's a 1-year marriage, or a 20-year marriage, those same issues are going to come in.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And for our listeners who might be going through a divorce or considering it, what advice or key takeaways would you give to them, being a matrimonial attorney for 20 plus years?
Sure. I think knowledge is everything. It really helps the process. And so to, have a consultation, even if it's something that you're thinking of that you don't envision taking steps to really act on ever, or years down the line, but getting knowledge of the process and kind of entering the situation with, eyes wide open, and getting information from professionals is key. I think that that's really good. Unfortunately, there are situations where sometimes a spouse, doesn't know the other wants a divorce and suddenly it happens. But again, still meeting with a lawyer, understanding your rights as a parent and a spouse and an owner of property. New York is an equitable distribution state. It does not matter if you're titled on the house. It doesn't matter if you're titled on the bank account. Unless there's a prenuptial agreement, anything acquired after the marriage is considered marital property. So you have equitable interests, even if not as a title owner. So not knowing about that is very, very helpful, I think.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Knowledge is certainly power. And Carla is offering a 30-minute consultation. Is that correct?
Yes. I offer a free 30-minute consultation as an initial meet. I think what I have found in my practice is the divorce lawyer that a person chooses, the matrimonial lawyer, custody lawyer, it doesn't always have to be divorce. It is a personal choice, and you need to know that you can work with the person that you select or hire. So that's why I offer free consultations, so that people can judge and get a feel of if I'm the right person for them.
Thank you so much. So Carla's contact information will be below with her email, her LinkedIn, and her phone number if you have any questions.
Well, thank you, Heather.
Everything will be kept confidential, so don't worry about that. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
You've been tuning into Heather Sells NYC with your host, Heather M. Cooper. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, heathersellsnyc.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.